All right. Louise, glad to see you again.
Oh, nice to see you again too.
That's great. So we're kind of both stuck inside because of this COVID thing. How you doing? I want to make sure you're taking care of yourself.
Not great. I'll be honest, not great.
hmm what do you said not great. What do you mean not great? What's kind of bugging you?
Well, I'm just, I know everybody's not getting out, but I mean, for me, not getting out is also not. I could go out in the yard.
hmm
I just don't feel like it. It
Mm.
doesn't like me.
It's just not like you.
No, no.
Yeah. And you said you could go out in the yard. What would you do if you went out into the yard?
I've got some planters on the patio. Some flower beds and some things, and I just poke around in them at least a little bit. But you know what? Kind of, the plants are all looking kind of peaked, and
Huh.
it's just, I don't know. It's not like me to not want to be out there.
Ah, I see. When you say that the plants are looking kind of peaked, and then the facial expression that you gave with that, to me, it almost seems like a metaphor, like the plants are kind of a description of how you're feeling.
Yeah, yeah, not great.
Yeah, yeah. So I wonder what would happen if you maybe worked on the plants a little bit. Do you think that would carrying over that same metaphor? You think that would cause you to feel more plant-like?
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe. I mean, I keep telling myself I should.
Yeah, yeah, and that the idea of should, boy, that sounds kind of judgmental on yourself. I'm
Well,
not sure. Yeah. Well, last time this is our second session, and we're just kind of getting to know each other. And I hadn't gone over much about your early childhood, and you mentioned right away in this session about how you could go outside, you should go outside. And I kind of wonder, when you were a little girl, was going outside something that you did a lot? Was that an experience that
oh,
you did?
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I used to play outside and create little forts. I mean, there were some bushes in the yard that, like, had the arching branches,
Uh-huh.
and you could create like a little. I mean, if when you're little, you can get under there. And I would have little rocks and things all arranged and kind of have my own little private playhouse there.
Okay. Now, just for a moment, for those of you watching, did you notice the change in her affect when she talked about playing outside as a little girl? So what I'm thinking as an Adlerian is, I want to get to be with her, this little girl, outside. And so I'm trying to understand what that felt like as a little girl. And now I'm going to try to encourage that to happen now as an adult. So I noticed, Louise, that when you talked about, being a little girl, that you kind of got brighter. In fact, you even smiled a little bit, which is kind of a little bit different than when you first started this session. So what did that feel like, this little girl outside in the garden? What was that like for you?
Oh, I was just remembering what it was, to be that little again, be able to like sit under the bushes. I mean, for me to like prune the hedges now, I'd love to be that small again.
Yeah. Yeah, so you said to be that little. So what does being little mean? What does that mean, to be little?
Um, I guess to have um, kind of that imagination and creativity that I used to have. That little girl used to, I mean, I had a whole elaborate little fairyland under the bush. I hadn't thought about it in a long time. That's, I guess, why I'm laughing.
Yeah, so when you were a little girl, you had this imaginary fairyland outside. And so did you have like a fort? No, what did you do? I mean, how did you
Built
create
it.
this land?
Yeah, nature built it.
Uh,
And how sometimes like a bush will have just a natural area that's like a small opening. It doesn't grow evenly.
mhm.
Well, as a little kid, I could scoot underneath, and then you have all of those branches kind of coming down. That makes a roof. Nobody can see you, and so it was like a natural playhouse. and I was small enough to get in there, and I guess my parents knew where I was.
Yeah. Okay, now, in Adlerian theory, one of the things we're looking for is comparison. She calls herself little, you know, and so what is the advantages of being little and the disadvantages of being little? Because in Adlerian theory, everyone deals with inferiority. And so I'm going to see if, as a little girl, was that an inferior position for her or a superior position for her? Because she's trying to overcome that feeling of littleness. And so I'm going to try to explore that a little bit more. So Louise, so this idea of, you know, that nature had created this little fort, I guess. Fort's my word. I don't want to use your word. I don't want to use my word. But you said it
I probably would have called it a fort.
It was a protective area.
Mhm.
Okay. So in that area, then you were little, could fit in there. You felt safe, secure. How did you feel when you're sitting in this nature's fort? What does that feel for you?
I guess it was fun. It was sort of, it was, I'm the youngest, so it would have been someplace that only I fit.
Yeah.
So nobody else probably could have cared, and nobody else would have, if they had come into the yard, I wouldn't have been bothering anybody. They probably would have taken a look, laughed, and kept going.
Okay. So this place for you, even though it was little, it was your domain. You were in control of this area. Is that what you're saying?
Nobody else would have fit.
Yeah. It was just made just for me.
Mhm.
Nobody else could fit there. I could fit there. And other people probably didn't really care about that, but I cared because I was important while I was in that area. This is my domain. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
That's
yeah, because I mean, I'd collect things in the yard and, kind of like little kids do when they create, little scenarios and,
Mhm.
I could lay out the sticks and create little things and use a rock or, just like crab apples and stuff I would find in the yard. And I was just sitting in there playing with what I would find in the yard and nobody cared.
Nobody cared. So it was you being yourself.
Mhm.
Wow. Wow. And now, are you still little or are you big now? What are you?
Uh, I don't know. This whole COVID thing, some ways I feel kind of small, kind of insignificant. I 10 meetings and you're just a little square in the whole big grid.
That's
Uh,
right.
I tend not to say a lot in meetings if I don't have to. So sometimes I just leave my screen blank. If you're not the one talking, you can just nod,
Hmm.
or I'll just put up a picture of a plant or something and they know it's me.
Yeah. Yeah. Plants are you, aren't they? Yeah. That's neat. I like that metaphor that you brought up, that how the plants look is how I'm feeling, and so I'm going to put a picture of me in the Zoom meeting. Here I am, a plant, you
Mhm.
know,
They
and
laugh. They know it's me.
oh yeah. Well, in that meeting, is the plant live and healthy, or is it kind of dwindling? And if you would do that.
I usually pull a picture out of my yard. Um, I've got pictures of some, plants from other years or whatever. Not one of them right now. I wouldn't show that off.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Well, I kind of feel like when you were talking about being little, I saw as this little girl who felt I'm in control of this area. This is my domain. I'm happy. People don't bother me. Now I'm an adult. I'm in this little box again, but I don't feel like I'm happy in this little box. I feel like I'm insignificant.
Yeah.
What's the difference between that little girl then and you now? You're both little. What made the difference?
There's a lot of responsibilities now. I'm not in those little Zoom boxes by this feels okay. It's just you and I.
Mhm.
But boy, when you're in one of those big meetings and you got, the grid across the top and everything, and you're just one of many, I'll type something into the chat so they know I'm still listening, but it just all feels kind of empty.
Empty, huh?
Yeah. I'm a numbers person. So unless somebody's asking me about, the report that I sent out or something. I mean, my boss and I meet like this, and it, we have a good relationship. So, I mean, that feels okay. But, quite a bit of the day I'm sitting in front of the computer. I feel like, I'd rather be, getting on top of some of the reports I have to do. And then you get stuck in meetings that just feel really pointless.
Yeah. And so that feeling that little girl had of being little but in control is not as apparent now for you.
No, and I told you about, my husband John and I are divorced, but he stops by the house and everything, and we talk about it, but it's really hard to help him understand why this is so hard. I mean, he keeps telling me, gosh, Louise, you're so lucky. I mean, you can work from home, and we do have friends that can't, and I feel really guilty that I'm so unhappy doing it. I mean, I guess I should feel lucky.
There's that word "should" again. That keeps coming up on you. Yeah. Yeah. So you should feel lucky, but I don't.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah. So, and then it's interesting. You mentioned your boss. You said you got a good relationship with him, and you mentioned your husband. And it sounds like even though the divorce has happened, you're still talking, still communicating some. But then I was thinking also back to that garden. Is there somebody who's bigger than you in that garden when you were a little girl?
Oh, my dad would have been in the yard quite a bit. My mom's was in the house. My mom owned the house. My dad, definitely the yard was his. So yeah. I know he knew I was under there.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You've got three important people in your life, and you're little in all of them. Here you are, the little girl, and dad's there, and he's important, but you feel good there. And then you have your boss. You said you feel kind of small and little in the Zoom meeting, but when it's like this with you and your boss, you get along well. And then with your husband, he's saying you're so lucky and you're not seeing it, and you're feeling like, oh, I should, and I just wonder, is there a common theme for these three people that runs for you? Is there something that kind of can we get the boss and the husband to cause the same feelings that we have when dad's in the garden with you?
Well, I mean, I see them all as caring.
Okay.
I mean, I know they all care about me. Obviously, way different relationships, but I would say that's a common thread.
So how can we get this little girl to feel powerful, in control here with the boss and with the husband? How can we get her to feel that like she did when nature made this throne for her and this domain that she could control? I mean, how can we get her to feel that way in these two relationships?
Gee, I don't know. I mean, I guess I see, like I said, I see them both as caring. Maybe it's that kind of in the current environment, they're not the problem. I guess that little bush was it was an environment I chose.
Yeah, you chose that one. And nature made it for you.
Yeah. And it all felt good. This I didn't choose. And so I've got these two, I've got, my husband and my boss both trying to help me feel good about it. I mean, they're trying.
Yeah.
But boy, I never would have chosen this. I mean,
so
I had a corner office.
You have a corner office.
It was beautiful. I mean, it was great. I could open the blinds. There were windows out there. People only came to, in if they needed me. I'd bang out the report and.
And so was your corner office overlooking the river?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really nice.
You're not overlooking the river at home, huh?
No.
Yeah. Nature seems to really have a big draw for you. It seems like that's something that you really need to keep encouraged and to feel like you're in control of your environment. Nature seems to call you.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd go out at lunch and go for a walk. They used to always laugh at me because I'd even like bundle up even when the weather was crummy, and I didn't care.
Uh-huh.
So
So what are you thinking?
he's like, "Why don't you go for a walk now?" And I'm like,
Just don't feel motivated. Don't want it. Nature's not calling you anymore, is what you're saying.
yeah, which honestly, both John and my boss are both very confused. They're like, you're not acting like yourself. And they're right.
Yet, you know that nature is encouraging for you, that it's energizing for you, that it makes you feel young and happy. And it reminds you of dad, of being with dad in the garden. Yet, you know these things, but you don't do those things.
Yeah, isn't that strange?
Yeah, we have a saying in Adlerian theory, which we say things like, if you aim for the moon, you may not hit the moon, but you might hit someplace before the moon, or maybe I don't know, maybe a better way to put this. If you're aiming for what's it called? It's still called Sears Tower in Chicago. Sears Tower.
Well, it's what the locals still call it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I won't tell you what the locals actually.
Yeah. So if you aim for Sears Tower, you may not make Sears Tower, but you'll get part way to Sears Tower. And so if you aim for, taking walks, that, you may not do that, but would there be a progression? Would there be something different that would happen in your life that maybe brings that little girl back to life? I'm just wondering, because you seem discouraged, and I'd like to see you be encouraged, with what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. All right. I'll try to drop the should.
That's a good idea.
All right.
Some people call that shitting on yourself.
Getting out on the patio. I get out there and I get frustrated that it's not what I'd like it to look like right now. But maybe if I just at least took my coffee out there in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me share something that I recently experienced. Just yesterday, I have a pot of tomatoes on my deck, and they had gotten too much water. We'd had a big rainstorm come through, and they experienced some kind of fungus on the bottom of the tomato. That's not cool. I mean, we don't want that. And so what I had to do is I had to repot that. So I took that plant out, put it in another pot, trimmed off the bad parts. Now I'm nursing it to try to get it to bring me good fruit, So it took some effort there, of me to do that. And you said, I'd like to go outside, but it's not quite what I want. And I wonder if maybe it could be maybe close to what you want. Would that be enough to get you started?
Well, maybe what I could do, I mean, normally I'm pretty ambitious. There's about a dozen planters on my patio. Maybe if I moved, so I get out there and they're all looking kind of shabby. Maybe if I just put most of them away, at least for now. There are a couple that are low maintenance that if with just a couple tweaks I could make look okay. It wouldn't be too bad. So that like if I took my coffee out there or if I went out there on a, you know, to take a break, I'm not sitting there looking at all of the shabbiness that just frustrates me.
I love that idea. Maybe next session, you can tell me if you did any of that, you know, and we'll talk about that and maybe talk about how that felt, and maybe some of that little girl will come back maybe when you do that. You even grin when I say that, you know, about the little girl coming back. So I know you like that idea of doing that.
I haven't thought about her in a while. She was
Yeah,
cute.
I bet she's a lot of fun.
She was mischievous.
Yeah, that's good. I like mischievous girls. I think they don't let people put them down. They stand up for themselves. You know, they're strong people. So it sounds like you have that in you.
I didn't get a corner office just sitting back.
That's a great point. That is a great point. Okay, now we're finishing up the session here because this is just a brief little bit. But what I want you to understand about Adlerian theory is sometimes a session will be almost totally metaphor. And if you look back, if you want to replay this, you'll look back and notice that we talked about her the whole time, but not talked about her. Did you see that? We were talking about the metaphor of nature, plants, those kinds of things. I tried to tie in these three individuals because I think if we can get her back in the garden with Dad, having fun, being mischievous, I think we're going to see some growth here. And so I brought in a little bit of my own experience. I had a little bit of countertransference during that time when she's talking about her plants. I'm like, well, I should share some of that with her because countertransference in Adlerian theory is just increased sociability. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong with me because I experienced that, but it gave me a chance to explain something from my life that maybe she could apply to her life. Maybe not. But the idea here, she picked up on it and she's going to try something to try to move forward to get her back to the garden. So thank you so much for watching this. I appreciate it. Bye.